About a year and a half ago, ProChara's big map rework video was released, guest starring FLC and me. But since then, there have been 6 seasons and 10 new maps to look at. That's why, once again, I decided to collab with ProChara to help me rework the remaining ones as of Sizzle Season 2024.
Hello, I'm Chara, and I'm really excited to be getting into the rest of these maps and going over some changes that we came up with.
Just real quickly, don't forget to like and subscribe since it really helps me out. Alright, let's get into it. We'll start off with Humpback Pump Track. A pretty unique stage that doesn't really need all that much to become good, due to its pretty open layout with interesting curved terrain. There's a lot of things that could change though, but the two biggest issues of Humpback are its incessant overuse of one-way drops and really tight choke points in its moving objective modes, particularly in Rainmaker that evolves the match into a bomb and special spam stall fest whenever the objective reaches these places. Fun!
First up, this ramp will be present in all modes, along with this uninkable block to the right from clams. Both of these routes will not only allow defenders to be able to back away freely and approach more easily, but attackers to reach these areas as well. To compensate for this, there will now be 2 defensive sponges to allow defenders to go back to their own base.
These would prove particularly useful when trying to defend in modes like Rainmaker, as this entire high ground has now been extended to where this building used to be, along with massive widening extensions to the 2 choke points. The one to the right is a bit wider with a bumper now as cover, but the main area to the left has now been completely overhauled, now with new low ground and a block to fight around.
The changes to these areas will of course help in all modes, but it targets Rainmaker specifically, since these choke points as they are currently kind of ruin how the map flows. Turning them into more in-depth areas that are a bit easier to fight in and defend in would make the stage feel a lot more amazing for all players, instead of being too focused on bomb or special spamming.
Also, I wanted to remove this entire blockade from the sides in all modes besides obviously Rainmaker, which still needs them, as it would open up the stage much more, kind of like its turf war layout. In fact, these sides being freely open is a huge contributor to why Humpback is the only map in the game that I can say the turf war is the best mode in.
For Rainmaker, the checkpoint jump now leads into a wider area, with cover to make it a better route.
For tower control, the path has been completely adjusted to avoid the trench and instead go through here slightly outside of it, which would feel much better for both teams. After that, it will then move up into the cubby, similar to its Splatoon 2 route, where instead of ending there, it will now lead to the 3rd check, before rising closer to spawn towards the goal right here.
And finally for clams, the basket was in desperate need of moving somewhere a bit more defender favored, so here is where it would go. Now it would take a little bit more effort to push.
All of these changes come together to make the map feel much better, less stally, and more open. Oh, Umami, what happened to you? You used to look so cool back then. Umami has a very linear path to spawn with a nauseatingly low amount of positions defenders can take. Once attackers reach this area along with this pillar, there's almost no way for defenders to realistically do anything with the lack of any meaningful high ground, making this one of the most snowbally maps in the game. Now that's what I would have said if the stage didn't get this Shadow Mega rework that honestly made it pretty dang good and even more visually appealing. It still suffers from snowbally issues in the moving objectives, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't majorly improved in every way. And man, that is a breath of fresh air to be able to say about this game. This rework was created before the official one and was heavily inspired by the original direct version. However, many aspects, of course, of the official one were also added after.
Starting in mid, the middle structure is now going to be paintable on all sides, like in the version we saw in the Splatoon 3 Direct, but now retaining the uninkable steps from the current one, since they're interesting and allow for some peeking with unique cover for certain weapons. The buildings from that direct version were also added to the sides, which act as new high ground that could be accessed by this grade, or from the opponent's ink rail, which was adjusted to aim up here.
Leading between these buildings and the pillar is a new low ground route, which goes under the grate and acts as a second route in and out of mid, along with another way to approach backlines here. Over on the left, this high ground, if you can even call it that, was made much bigger and actually inkable. Again, like the direct version. With a new low ground route around it adding, you guessed it, another route in and out of mid.
Back up to the right spawn, the entire defensive grading was completely extended and replaced by an inkable wooden plank terrain. Again, like the beta version of the stage, which would make taking back the pillar much easier, along with obviously being a good defensive spot from the new low ground. This uninkable tarp was also extended along with it as a safety net.
Last but not least, you'll notice this completely overhauled left side low ground, which I really wanted to make much more useful as a pushing option. I always thought Umami's area out of spawn kind of reminded me of Camp Triggerfish's, which had these really interesting pillars in its beta version that I wanted to repurpose as Egyptian pillars. These not only act as cover, but platforms to jump to and from, adding 2 branch routes from below. below. One allows for a quick jump to this old graded path, and the other brings you to this platform that can be used to poke spawn. This pillar, however, is blocked off from being climbed, and instead is useful for defenders to shoot from, as an extension to this newly added left side high ground.
The only two objective changes here were to Rainmaker and Clamblets. Rainmaker will now actually have a second checkpoint, with the first one being moved a little bit further up where this block usually is, and the new one being added to the low ground replacing a pillar. The goal was also moved a bit further up and closer to the left side, basically allowing there to be two solid routes.
And in Clams, the basket was moved a bit further back to compensate for this new flank, along with this whole left flank actually being useful now. If this was Umami normally, I would play it. Ship shape like Crab Leg is almost there to being an actual good stage, but it's just held back from very small yet impactful issues that greatly reduce its enjoyability factor. I think the most apparent issue is the entire lack of a left side, especially in zones where this grate isn't even accessible. The only way to approach mid is either directly through it or from your right side, which is honestly a great area with almost every wall being paintable, but because that's the only way, it falls into the Splatoon 3 flounder problem where fights devolve into a hallway battle or bomb spam towards backline sitting here.
First up, the left side, which I should probably just say sides, considering it connects all the way around now. In this new area, there's a defensive sponge in the corner, a balloon for cover, and this ramp which allows a vulnerable jump to and from the main area.
This whole side of the wall will still be uninkable, along with a bit of it around here, but with the ability to navigate completely around mid from both the left and right, along with this block to the grate being present in all modes, we've basically already fixed the map's biggest issues.
Ship shape will keep its main gimmick, being the tall mid with glass walls underneath, but now in all modes, since it's really interesting terrain that's sadly only trapped in zones and turf war. It will also keep its similar dual ramp structure closer to spawn, which is oddly only in turf war for some reason. Like, seriously, this part is needed a bit more since this map is pretty lockout heavy, so I'm not even sure why it got taken out.
Finally, this bridge to the right will as well be present in all modes. However, the middle platform will now be a bit higher to act as cover, giving shorter range weapons an actual chance to contest backlines instead of it just being a big straightaway, and the cool terrain that allows you to access it from the low ground previously only in Rainmaker will also be present.
The Rainmaker pedestals were the only objective in any real need of change, so they were tweaked a bit to be a bit more equal. Now the left one has been brought a bit closer, where it will now reside on the bridge instead of requiring it to cross. This even makes the pillar thing a little bit more useful, and the goal was brought over a small bit to the left as well to compensate.
Again, ship shape isn't really that bad of a map, at least for Splatoon 3 standards, but a few more adjustments and ways to move to the left make it feel way better. Marlin Airport is an interesting stage because it's the first in this game to actually try and incorporate a gimmick mechanic into it. You could argue it's a lazy attempt considering it's just a copy of Anchovy's fans, but personally I think it does it better in many ways, since you actually use the fans more than once every 3 matches, and the opponents can actually access and use them pretty easily too. This map is actually pretty dang good, with a ton of movement options in mid. It's just that its biggest fault is how this fan is the only way in or out of mid, leading to a really cramped and stally area that's hard to fight in. That, on top of how the fan isn't even accessible until the checkpoint is broken in Rainmaker, leads to a really terrible feeling entrance to mid. Just an example of how one small thing can make a good map bad.
Mid is basically the same, but if you turn your attention to the main propellers, they've been extended to align with the grade and also be paintable on every side. This also allows for a new angle to approach the enemy's side, as well as adding the fan from Rainmaker and Clamblets to all modes.
Speaking of those fans, the sides have had an extension to allow better access to them, stretching way further over here to a new paintable wall, leading to this new chunk of land that gives a safer flanking angle to the fan, rather than needing to pass straight through drop. This fan had to shrink a bit though to compensate. Sorry.
Once out of mid, you'll notice the ramp from the moving objectives will always be present as well, allowing for more freedom for the attackers instead of just simply trying to funnel past this uninkable ramp. To make up for that, the sponge was moved to the center of the area, acting as better defensive terrain and an easy way back and forth between these platforms.
This ground and spawn was extended to make defending easier, and there's also this new inker that connects to the new terrain, allowing for a quick way to access the left side and rotate fully around mid without dropping. And that's already it for Marlin. You see, that's what happens when the devs decide to actually add a cool map with positive attributes. We don't have to change all that much or complain about how boring and missed potential it is. Which now, we must speak of it! Oh boy! Last but not least is Barnacle and Dime. Far from the worst map in the game, arguably being the most playable of the 3 Tetris pieces, before they all had a small injection of life during Sizzle Season. But personally, I find it to be the lamest of them all, and dare I use the dramatic word, Insulting. How do you make a stage about a mall and not even attempt to do anything with the theme? Maybe it's just a Coconut Mall bias, seeing how cool that map is, but still. At launch, this was the most generic, basic layout that featured absolutely no spark of creativity in the slightest. And that's just in the theming. Personally, I can never even understand how anyone considered it good in a gameplay sense either. Now, I know this stage was reworked in the most recent season, and while the inclusion of the low ground and overall layout changes led to this map to actually flow pretty well and be 10 times better than whatever this was, it still stands that nothing about this map makes you feel like you're fighting in a mall. Which is why, instead of just fixing the objective gameplay issues with Barnacle, I'm gonna break the mold and completely reimagine this place while still keeping the basic skeleton intact. Boom! Feaster eyes. I know there's a lot and it's very unrealistic, but I'm just letting my creativity fully take over, you know? The first thing you'll notice are the palm trees. There are major low ground expansions to the sides featuring new escalator-esque conveyors. So let's look at them.
These sides are obviously massive, not only completely allowing you to avoid mid and flank behind the opponent's stack, but also acting as a full arena to fight it with unique geometry inspired by a mall. It's good to note with how low these areas are, the entirety of the stage has been moved up slightly to compensate, since they'd all be underwater otherwise.
For the escalators, which resemble more the conveyors from Mario Kart 8's version of Coconut Mall, green arrows mean they move up and red down. This means that certain ones are more favorable to their respective teams. So for instance, dropping to your left then flanking is much quicker and favorable due to the escalator moving up to your desired destination, as opposed to dropping right and trying to flank to the opponent's spawn, which is still possible, but seeing as the escalator is moving against you, it's slow and punishable.
In the low ground, there's another structure similar to the one in mid, with 2 palm trees and a fancy mall bridge. There's 4 ways to leave the area, being these 3 escalators along with this climbable ledge. When riding up this escalator behind the stack, this entire area has been expanded, featuring a giant defender sponge to help in fights against flankers, along with allowing a jump back to your high ground. And further up, this balloon was replaced by another palm tree.
Moving closer to spawn, there are also a lot of big changes. First, this block will now be rotated so the fire extinguisher faces towards mid, allowing for the ability to be squiddled off of. This cushion staircase will be present in all modes. There's another down moving escalator as an option to approach, and there's a new grate here to allow for movement between these high grounds along with easier defending against this escalator.
The defender high ground was made inaccessible to attackers, with it now connecting all the way to the spawn region and having this sponge for defenders to retreat to it. There's also 2 more palm trees up here, and the left side of spawn now extends to allow a quick drop to the low ground as a defensive position.
And for the 2 objective changes, Rainmaker and Tower.
In Tower, the new path will take advantage of this area.
Though it was pretty dang hard to figure out a balanced path that also moved through both sides of the map, so I did the best I could.
It will start off basically the same, with the first check here and the second one in the same general area. However, instead of going into this awkward, very difficult to defend high ground, it will instead dart right, moving into these new side areas, going up the escalator to where the third check will be found. After that, it goes up the cushion stairs and toward the goal.
And last but not least, for Rainmaker, a second check was added to the sides, where this escalator will actually be off in the mode, to allow unrestricted movement out of that path. And the goal was moved here, approachable from the sofa chairs, this escalator, or if you're feeling really spicy, this high ground. I'm sure many could argue this new layout is a bit too cluttered or big, but honestly, I'm the most proud of this one, and I would really kill to actually be able to play on it. Plus, you know, just adding a left side in general, and much more ways to defend and approach, would make the map feel just amazing to play on. Like, why can't we have this, man? Well, that's half the stages, but there's still 5 more to check out over on Chara's channel if you haven't already. So go check that out!
Thanks for checking out this video. If you want to take a look at my channel, we covered the other 5 stages. My personal favorite being a Manta rework partially inspired by the tricolor layout with some unique boats. You can learn more about it on my channel.
Thanks for being here, man. Once again, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!